All right, so get ready, because today we're going deep into the world of emotional intelligence.
Oh, exciting.
And to guide us on this journey, we have, of course, Daniel Goleman's incredible book, Emotional Intelligence.
A classic.
We'll unpack the key ideas from it and really see how they connect to our lives.
You know, it's interesting because Goleman really kind of shook things up when he challenged that traditional view of like IQ, as if it's like the be-all and end-all of intelligence.
Yeah.
He argues that emotional intelligence, we call it EQ, is as important for success.
I like that EQ. It's catchy.
Yeah.
So he starts the book with this really captivating story about a bus driver in New York City.
Okay.
And he's navigating, a crowded bus, tons of people.
Of course, New York.
Stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
Everyone is stressed out.
I can imagine.
You would expect, like, a really grumpy atmosphere, right?
Totally, yeah.
But this bus driver is different.
Okay.
He greets every single passenger with a smile. He tells jokes. He even bursts into song.
Wow, what a guy.
It's amazing. And you know what? The entire mood of the bus changes.
Really?
Yeah. People start laughing. They start chatting. They even offer their seats to each other.
It's amazing how one person's, I guess, high EQ can have that ripple effect, huh?
Totally.
Impacting everyone around them.
And then Goleman contrasts this heartwarming story with, like, some news snippets from the same week.
Yeah.
And it's, a 9-year-old boy who ends up destroying his entire classroom.
Oh, my goodness.
After being called a baby by another kid.
Oh, wow.
And then also a shooting at a rap club because of a perceived insult.
These are definitely more extreme examples.
Yeah, they're intense. They really highlight those consequences, of like when emotional intelligence is missing.
Yeah, for
real. Makes you wonder, like, okay, what is emotional intelligence actually?
Right.
How do we define this thing?
So Goleman defines emotional intelligence as being just as vital as, like we were saying, IQ for, navigating life successfully.
Yeah.
He argues that being intellectually brilliant just isn't enough.
Right. So, like, book smarts can only get you so far.
Yeah, and he has this great story of a Harvard student.
Okay.
This student aced his SATs, right? Perfect score.
Wow.
But he really struggled to graduate.
So it's like he had all the intellectual ability.
He had all the smarts, but yeah.
But something was missing.
Something was missing, yeah.
Interesting.
So Goleman proposes that emotional intelligence is made up of 5 core components.
5, okay.
Let's start with self-awareness.
Okay.
This is the ability to recognize and understand your own emotions.
I feel like that's huge, right? Being able to, like, label what you're feeling.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then what comes after that?
Then you've got managing emotions.
Okay.
So how you handle those feelings so they don't control you.
So it's like, you might feel angry, but it doesn't mean you have to, like, explode.
Exactly.
Right? There's a way to kind of manage that.
Exactly.
What's the third one?
Motivating yourself. It's using your emotions as fuel to reach your goals.
So channeling those emotions productively.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then there's empathy, being able to understand what others are feeling.
Yeah, putting yourself in their shoes.
Exactly. That's a big one. It is. And then lastly, you have handling relationships.
Okay.
So managing emotions in social situations.
I feel like that's where all of them come together.
In a way, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive deeper into self-awareness.
Okay.
Because Goleman talks about this fascinating idea of what he calls emotional hijacking.
Okay.
Where your emotions basically take over before you even have time to think.
It's like that fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
It just kicks in.
And he gives this really interesting story of Richard Robles, who is a recently paroled burglar.
Okay.
Who is determined to, like, turn his life around.
Yeah.
But when he faces really intense financial pressure,
oh no,
he gives in to his old habits.
He goes back.
Yeah, and he commits another burglary, even though he knows it's wrong.
So he knows it's wrong, but
the pressure, the emotions, it's like they short-circuit his decision-making.
It's like his willpower just disappeared.
Totally, yeah.
This emotional hijacking is a powerful concept, isn't it?
It is. It makes you wonder how much control we actually have.
Yeah, when those strong emotions are at play.
Like, are we really as rational as we think we are?
That's a great question.
So tell me a little bit more about, like, the neuroscience behind this.
Okay.
Like, what's happening in our brains during these emotional hijacking moments?
So Goleman explains that the amygdala, our brain's emotional center, can react before the neocortex.
Which is the thinking part.
Exactly, the thinking part.
Our brains are so complex.
They are.
It's like emotions bypass rational thought.
He calls it a neural back alley, like a shortcut in the brain.
Wow.
And get this, Stress hormones actually make the memory of emotional events stronger.
So that's why, like, certain emotional experiences stay with us for so long.
Exactly, whether they're good or bad. Those emotional memories can be incredibly powerful.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
He also talks about this fascinating case of Elliot,
Oh, yeah.
this man who lost his ability to make decisions after brain surgery.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of decisions?
Like even simple ones.
Oh, wow.
Like what to eat for lunch.
Really?
So even though his intellect was still there,
Intact.
he couldn't make these basic decisions.
I don't know what that felt like for him.
It's wild, right? It suggests that emotions are really vital for decision making.
Even the seemingly rational ones.
Which is so interesting, right? Because I think we often think of emotions as this, like interference.
Yeah, like getting in the way.
Good decision making.
But they're actually crucial.
It totally shifts your perspective.
Absolutely.
And he also mentions this condition called alexithymia, right?
Yes. This is where someone has difficulty identifying and expressing their feelings.
So, like, they might feel physical sensations, but not know the emotion behind it.
Exactly. Imagine you have a stomachache or a headache, but you can't connect that to a specific emotion.
So it's like you just feel bad, but you don't know why.
Exactly. And this can create so many challenges in life, personal, professional.
Like, you're not even able to communicate it.
Right.
Wow, this makes self-awareness seem even more important.
It really is the foundation of emotional intelligence.
Okay, so let's move on to the next component. Managing emotions.
Okay, let's do it.
Because, you know, I think this is something that everybody struggles with at some point.
Absolutely. Keeping those emotions in check.
Goleman starts off by really highlighting the importance of managing anger,
Oh, yeah.
especially its impact on our physical health.
Oh, interesting.
He points to research showing how chronic anger can actually damage our hearts.
That's a bit scary.
It is scary, and it's not just about, like, avoiding those big outbursts of anger, right? It's like, it's also about that low-grade anger
The simmering, yeah.
that simmers over time.
Exactly. He talks about hostility as being really detrimental.
Yeah, it's like that resentment that can build up.
Just as harmful as outward aggression.
And, of course, it's not just anger that we need to manage, right? He also talks about chronic worry and anxiety.
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely guilty of overthinking and worrying about things I can't control.
Me too.
What does he say about that?
So he highlights the pitfalls of rumination.
Yeah.
Getting stuck in those loops of negative thoughts.
Right, that don't lead to solution.
That don't get you anywhere.
Yeah.
He suggests relaxation techniques.
Okay.
And things like cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, to kind of reframe those thought patterns.
It's so interesting how he connects, like, emotional well-being to physical health.
Yeah, the mind-body connection is so important.
It really is. And he even dives into, like, sadness and coping mechanisms.
Okay, like crying.
Yeah. Like, is crying actually good for us?
That's a great question.
I feel like that's a debate, right?
Yeah, it's complex.
Some people are like, no, you got to let it all out.
You gotta have a good cry.
And other people are like, no, bottling it up.
Yeah, stiff upper lip.
So where does Goleman fall on this?
Well, he acknowledges that crying can sometimes provide relief.
Okay.
But he cautions that it can also prolong the sadness.
So it's not always a good thing.
If it makes you stay fixated on what's making you sad, it might not be.
Makes sense.
He suggests that sometimes distractions can actually be more effective.
Okay, so like what kind of distractions?
Things you enjoy, reading, spending time with people you love,
Right.
watching a funny movie.
Sometimes you just need a break.
Yeah, to shift your mood.
Before you can really process it all.
Yeah, and he even points out that too much TV, well, can be a distraction.
Yeah, it's easy, right?
It can actually make you feel worse.
Really?
Research shows that heavy TV watchers tend to feel more depressed after watching than they did before.
Interesting.
So just passively sitting there
Doesn't really help.
might not be the best way to cope.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the third component of emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Motivating oneself.
Okay.
I'm curious to hear what Goleman says about this.
So he argues that motivation, especially the ability to delay gratification,
Okay.
is a crucial factor in achieving long-term success.
Makes sense. Like, it's not just about that instant gratification. It's about, like, working towards something.
It's about discipline and perseverance.
This reminds me of that classic marshmallow test.
Oh, yeah, with the 4-year-old.
Where they could eat one marshmallow right away.
Or wait and get 2.
And the kids who could wait. They showed significant advantages later in life.
It's amazing how predictive that one test was.
So it wasn't just about willpower in that moment.
It was about future success, yeah.
Like, what kind of advantages did these kids have?
Well, they had better social skills.
Okay.
They did better in school.
Wow.
Even scored higher on their SATs.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
So, like, learning to delay gratification early on can really have a big impact.
Huge impact.
Goleman also talks about this concept of flow. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, like when you're completely absorbed in what you're doing.
Yes. Time just flies by.
When you lose track of everything.
How does that relate to motivation?
He describes it as effortless concentration and enjoyment.
It's the best feeling.
It is. And because it feels so good, it makes you want to keep doing it.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
Motivation leads to flow. Flow leads to more motivation.
And that cycle can be incredibly powerful.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about empathy.
Okay.
The fourth component of emotional intelligence.
Such a crucial aspect of relationships.
It really is. It's like the foundation of strong connections.
It's a skill that can be learned and developed.
And Goleman talks about how empathy develops in children, right?
Yes. Even infants show signs of distress when they see other babies crying.
It's like we're wired for it from a very young age.
And as children grow, they develop a more complex understanding of emotions.
And he emphasizes parental attunement
Right.
as playing a key role.
Yes, it's about how parents respond to their children's emotional states.
So it's not just about, like, telling kids to calm down.
No, it's about mirroring their feelings, validating their experiences.
It's like emotional coaching.
Exactly, creating
Okay.
that safe space for them to express their emotions.
I wonder how much our own childhood experiences shape our current empathy levels.
It's an interesting question.
He also talks about some fascinating research on empathy in primates.
Oh, yes. The rhesus monkey study.
Tell me about that one.
So they trained these monkeys to fear a specific tone.
Okay.
Then they put them in separate cages where they could see each other on a screen.
Okay.
One monkey would hear the tone and show fear.
Okay.
The other monkey, watching this, could press a lever to prevent the first monkey from getting shocked,
So they would take action to protect the other monkey.
even though they weren't experiencing the fear themselves.
That's incredible.
It suggests that empathy might not be exclusive to humans.
That's a big idea.
It is.
But, Goleman also explores the darker side of this.
Right, the absence of empathy.
Like in his discussion of psychopaths.
Yes, those who lack the capacity for empathy.
And he gives this chilling example of sadistic serial killers.
Right, who actually derive pleasure from causing suffering.
It's a stark contrast,
It is.
but it highlights how important empathy is for a functioning society.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's wrap up this part of our deep dive by talking about handling relationships.
The fifth and final component.
I feel like this is where it all comes together, right?
In a way, yes.
All the other components are kind of necessary for this one.
You need self-awareness, emotional management, motivation, and empathy.
To navigate those complex human connections.
Exactly.
I'm really interested in what he has to say about the differences between men and women.
In terms of emotional expression.
Yeah, like, are there differences in how we communicate our emotions?
He talks about research suggesting that girls tend to be better at reading emotional cues
Okay.
and expressing their feelings.
Whereas boys are often taught to kind of suppress those vulnerable emotions.
Yeah, like boys don't cry.
And this can obviously create challenges in relationships.
Especially between men and women.
Yeah, and he gives some examples of common pitfalls.
In communication.
Like destructive criticism, negative thought patterns.
Things that can really erode a relationship.
So it's not just about, like, avoiding arguments.
No, it's about learning to communicate more effectively.
So we've covered a lot of ground.
We have
The 5 core components of emotional intelligence.
self-awareness, managing emotions, motivating yourself, empathy, and handling relationships.
We've only just begun to scratch the surface.
There's so much more to explore.
But before we move on, what are some of the insights that have really resonated with you so far?
I think the idea that emotional intelligence is not fixed, that we can develop it throughout our lives.
That's huge.
It is. It's empowering.
Because it means we have the power to change.
Exactly.
And in the next part of our deep dive,
Yes.
we're going to delve into the workplace and raising emotionally intelligent children.
Two very important areas.
Yes. But for now, I encourage you to think about what we've discussed and how it applies to your life.
What resonates with you?
What areas could you maybe develop further?
It's a journey.
It is.
Self-discovery.
And we'll continue it next time.
Sounds good.
See you then. Okay, so welcome back. We're diving back into emotional intelligence, and now we're going to turn our attention to the workplace.
The workplace, yes.
Because, I think sometimes we forget how much our emotions can impact our professional lives.
It's true. Emotions are everywhere.
They're everywhere. Yeah.
Goleman really emphasizes that emotional intelligence is super important for good leadership,
Mm.
strong teamwork, and just overall success in organizations.
So it makes sense. Workplaces are all about people, right?
Absolutely.
Interacting, collaborating, and to do that well, you need emotional
He needs
intelligence.
those people skills.
Yeah, you got to be able to navigate those dynamics.
He tells this really interesting story about an airline pilot.
Okay.
This pilot was known for being quite intimidating and
Who?
very critical.
Okay, not someone you want to be flying with.
Well, his co-pilot was so nervous around him
I can imagine.
that he hesitated to point out a potential safety concern during a flight.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so the pilot's low EQ, you could say,
Mm-hmm.
actually created this environment where communication was stifled.
Wow, that's a little unnerving.
Yeah.
Everyone was okay, though, right?
Luckily, nothing bad happened.
Okay, good.
But it really highlights the dangers of low EQ in a leadership position.
Totally, yeah.
It can impact the whole team.
The ripple effect.
Stifled communication, compromised teamwork.
So what about empathy?
Empathy.
What does Goleman say about empathy in leadership?
Well, he did a survey of 250 executives,
Okay.
and they rated empathy as a very crucial trait for effective management.
Interesting.
They said it was key for building trust and rapport within teams.
That makes sense.
It's not just about being, the smartest person in the room.
It's about connecting with people.
Exactly. Understanding their perspectives.
It seems like the nature of work is changing, too.
It is.
So many jobs now are about collaboration, knowledge sharing.
Which requires even more emotional intelligence.
I see that.
Yeah.
Goleman talks about this need for a cultural shift in the workplace
Mm-hmm.
to foster more tolerance, more inclusion.
And it goes deeper than just, surface level diversity training.
Right. It's about really valuing those differences.
He also talks about group intelligence.
What's that?
The idea that teams with high social harmony and trust are the most effective.
So it's not just about individual brilliance.
No, it's about how well everyone works together.
This makes me think of those informal networks in a company.
The grapevine.
Yeah, the ones that aren't on the org chart.
But are so vital.
Goleman talks about their significance, right?
Yeah, because they rely on trust, communication, expertise.
It's like the nervous system of the company.
They carry vital information, connecting people in ways that formal structures can't always do.
And to navigate those networks, you need emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. Building trust, communicating effectively, understanding social dynamics.
So how do we apply all these insights to our own work lives?
I think the key is to really be mindful of the emotional dynamics at play in our interactions.
Okay.
Are we creating a positive, supportive environment? Are we communicating with empathy? Are we fostering collaboration?
Those are great questions to ask ourselves, for sure.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a more emotionally intelligent workplace.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Goleman's insights on raising emotionally intelligent children.
Oh, this is a crucial topic.
It is. It really hits home,
This section really emphasizes how important early childhood experiences are.
for shaping our emotional development.
Is where it all begins.
He has this powerful analogy.
Okay.
Two mothers responding to their babies crying in the middle of the night.
Okay.
In one scenario, the mom is loving, attentive, creating a secure environment. And in the other, the mom is stressed, irritable, projecting her own stress onto the baby.
So it shows how the parent's emotional state really affects the child.
Yeah, it's not just about isolated incidents.
No, it's about those consistent patterns of interaction.
that shape the child's developing emotional world.
And he goes on to talk about the effects of what he calls emotionally inept parenting.
Yeah, and he gives that example of Martin, the toddler,
Oh, yes, Mark.
who's already showing signs of bullying and cruelty.
It's sad, right?
It is so young.
It really highlights how early trauma can impact a child's emotional development.
But Goleman offers hope too, right?
He does.
He suggests that interventions can help.
Yes, things like emotional literacy programs in schools.
Okay, tell me more about those.
So in these programs, kids learn self-awareness,
Okay.
emotional management, empathy, conflict resolution,
Like they're getting a toolbox.
so like essential life skills.
He highlights programs like the self-science curriculum at the Nueva Learning Center
Okay.
and the Child Development Project. What are those like?
At Nueva, the kids learn about emotions through fun activities,
Yeah, okay.
open discussions, even role-playing.
That sounds engaging.
Yeah, and the Child Development Project integrates emotional learning into the everyday school life.
So it's not just a separate
That's
class.
woven into everything.
Do these programs actually work?
Well, the research is promising.
Okay.
Studies show the kids who participate in these programs have better self-awareness, stronger self-control, improved social skills.
Yeah, that's impressive.
They also show less aggression, more empathy,
That's great.
develop better relationships,
Wow.
and even perform better academically.
So emotional intelligence can actually boost academic performance.
That's what the research suggests.
It's like we're finally recognizing that our emotions play a role in learning.
Exactly. Goleman argues that we should be teaching these skills in all schools.
If we want kids to thrive, we need to give them the emotional tools to succeed.
Absolutely.
We've talked about the workplace, we've talked about children.
Two very different contexts.
But the message is clear. Emotional intelligence matters.
It matters a lot.
It impacts our success, our well-being, our relationships, our society.
Goleman really believes in its transformative power.
It makes you wonder how much of our emotional tendencies are set in stone.
Nature versus nurture, right?
Can we change, or are we stuck with what we're born with?
That's a question we'll dive into in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm looking forward to it. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of emotional intelligence, and I'm really excited for this part because we're tackling the big question, the one we've been kind of dancing around this whole time.
The big question, yes.
Can we really change our innate emotional tendencies?
It's nature versus nurture, the age-old debate.
It really is. Are we basically stuck with the emotional predispositions we're born with, or can we actually reshape our emotional responses? It feels like a really important question, you know?
Absolutely. It has huge implications for how we understand ourselves and our capacity for growth.
So how does Goleman approach this question?
He starts by diving into the concept of temperament.
Okay, temperament, like, some people are naturally more outgoing, others are more shy.
Exactly, that inborn predisposition we have towards certain emotional patterns.
Right, it's like our default setting.
Goleman acknowledges that temperament has a strong biological basis.
Okay, so like our genes play a role.
He even points to research linking activity in specific brain areas to different temperamental traits.
So our brain wiring influences our emotional tendencies.
There's a lot of research supporting that idea.
Like what?
Well, for example, studies have shown that people with more activity in the left prefrontal cortex tend to be more cheerful and optimistic,
Okay.
while those with more activity on the right side are more prone to negativity and anxiety.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
It sounds like our brains are kind of hardwired for certain emotional patterns.
To a certain extent, yes.
But then does that mean we're stuck with those patterns?
That's the big question.
Can we change our temperament?
While Goleman recognizes the biological basis of temperament, he argues that it's not destiny.
Okay, so there's hope.
There's definitely hope.
I like hearing that.
He believes that experience, especially in early childhood, can significantly shape and modify our temperamental tendencies.
That makes sense. Those early years are so crucial for development.
He cites research by psychologist Jerome Kagan, who studied a group of children identified as having a timid temperament at age 4.
So these were kids who were naturally shy and fearful.
Yes, but here's the interesting part. By the time they reached kindergarten, about a third of them had shed their timidness.
Really?
They were no longer those shy, fearful kids.
That's amazing what happened.
Well, Kagan found that parenting played a big role.
Okay, so how the parents responded to their kids' shyness made a difference.
Exactly. The mothers who gently encouraged their timid children to be more outgoing, who helped them learn to cope with their fears, saw their children become braver over time.
So they were providing that support, but also that gentle push.
Yes, like scaffolding, helping them step outside their comfort zones.
That's so interesting. What about the kids whose shyness persisted?
Kagan found that the parents who were overly protective, always shielding their children from anything upsetting, actually reinforced their fearfulness.
It's like they were unintentionally making it worse.
In a way, yes.
So it seems like finding that balance is key.
Exactly. Providing support, but also encouraging exploration and resilience.
This makes me think about the research on brain plasticity.
You mean how our brains can change and adapt throughout our lives?
Exactly. Goleman even brings up the famous studies by Weisel and Hubel.
The Nobel Prize winners.
Yes, they showed that if you deprive a kitten of visual input from one eye during a critical period early in life,
The kitten essentially becomes blind in that eye.
even though the eye itself is healthy.
The brain hasn't developed the necessary connections to process the information.
But the amazing thing is, This blindness can be reversed if the eye is opened before the critical period ends,
It highlights the incredible plasticity of the brain.
especially in those early years.
And Goleman argues that the same principle applies to emotional development.
Our experiences actually shape the neural circuitry of our emotional brains.
He uses a musical analogy. The more we practice playing an instrument, the stronger the connections in our brain become.
So it's like training our emotional muscles.
Exactly. The more we practice managing our emotions, the better we get at it.
That's really encouraging.
It is.
It means we have the power to change, even if our initial temperament might predispose us to certain emotional patterns.
We can learn and grow.
So can we truly change our innate emotional tendencies?
I think, based on all the evidence, the answer is yes.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
It means we're not just prisoners of our genes or our past experiences.
We have the ability to shape our own emotional destinies.
And that's a really hopeful way to end our deep dive into emotional intelligence.
I agree.
We've explored the power of emotions, how they can both help us and hinder us, and how emotional intelligence is this vital life skill, not just for individual success, but for creating a more compassionate and understanding world.
It's about recognizing the power of our emotions
Yeah.
and learning to use them wisely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into emotional intelligence.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've learned something new and maybe even feel inspired to cultivate greater emotional intelligence in your own life.
Until next time.
Keep diving deep.